I've always had a hard time when it came to getting a job, and it's very likely that that'll continue on throughout the rest of my life. Now, for anybody wondering, no, I'm not some kind of lazy, good-for-nothing, fat, balding man who lives in his mother's basement, eating Cheetos all day while furiously typing away at YouTube comments. That's not even close to what I do. Or I guess in this case, what I don't do. It's more of a combination of mental issues as well as a lack of proper, well, drive. To be more specific, I'm a skinny 23-year-old man who has a really bad problem with keeping myself focused on any important topic for more than just a few days. While that might not sound too bad on paper, I assure you that having to live a day-to-day life knowing that you can't seem to keep your attention on something for more than just a few days or even at the very most a week at a time to be really difficult. Not just that, it really sucks. I honestly don't even know how any of this really started up, but from the many stories that my aunt and others have told me about my past, I was, well, basically, I was more like Finbar Calamitous from Jimmy Neutron. Basically that one genius that could never finish anything. I was basically a living, breathing copy of that character, only 5 times worse. Apparently, when I was at least 6 or 7 at the time, I started this downward spiral of my life when I wouldn't even finish my food. It didn't matter what it was, or if the food was one of my favorite meals. I just wouldn't eat the whole thing. At first, this was simply thought of as being the startup of a picky eater phase that most children tend to go through in their lives. However, that was only the startup of my problems. When I turned 11, my grades and everything started to drop more and more. And this was simply because of the fact that I really just had no interest or desire to finish it. No, I wasn't being rebellious or anything like that. In fact, I've been told that I was actually a pretty good kid by my friends and even my parents. It's just more of a... how do I put this? It felt kind of more like a switch. Okay, maybe that's not the best analogy, but it is the truth. What would basically go on in my head is that I'd be focused for a short period of time on doing whatever it was that I was working on, being schoolwork, homework, hobbies, television, video games, etc. But right as I'm about to finish it up, or really getting into it, I suddenly stop what I'm doing and basically either lose immediate interest or basically just go and do something else. I mean, that's kind of what it is. I lose interest, and no matter what I do, or what others do, I would never really do anything about it. I would just lose interest and didn't even bother looking back at it again. And that's basically what I wind up going through on a day-to-day basis, and it's only gotten worse as the years went on. My parents, God bless them, have done everything in their power to try and get me the help that I needed, and they technically succeeded with doing that. Around the time that I had started to slip in my grades and thus start failing school, my parents attempted to try and put a stop to it by forcing me to do my work, which never worked. Then they threatened to take away my things as a punishment. That, as well, didn't even work. In fact, it didn't even really bother me, as I wasn't even interested with really anything that was even in my room. I mean, as any new kind of toy, device, electronic, or even food that was quickly thrown out of my mind and earlier forgotten about in my closet, or, well, left in the fridge or freezer until it pretty much went bad. That's when my parents took me to a few therapists to see if I happened to have any kind of mental issues, or maybe even physical, that might be causing it. That was likely causing me to act the way that I was. The therapist that I vaguely remembered, I think her name was Dr. May, was the only one that I could actually really recall, and that was because of the odd way that she managed to properly diagnose me. Basically, what she wound up doing for me was opening up a toy chest, books, drawing utensils and other items, and basically any other kind of things that kids my age would be interested in, and simply sat down in her chair right in the middle of it. Well, when I had walked in and sat down next to her on a couch, I remember waiting for her to say something to me, basically the typical kind of therapist kind of stuff that normally goes on. But instead, She simply smiled and said one sentence. I want you to go and play with anything here that you want to play with. Video games, puzzles, drawings, toys, anything you like for the next hour or so. And don't mind me either. I'm just here to take a couple of quick notes. And with that, I basically did what she asked me to do. Although, not for very long. Everything that I wound up playing with, drawing and the like, only became something of a past memory only a few minutes after playing with them. After nearly 30 minutes of this, I was pretty much back sitting on the sofa near the window of the room, doing completely and utterly nothing. The therapist did nothing else more but thank me for my time and then proceeded to escort me out of the room, telling me that she'd clean up the mess. Upon getting into the lobby, Dr. May had my parents come into the room and talk for a very long time. When they finally did come out of their room, my parents looked rather upset, but at the same time, slightly content. From what my mother told me later that week, the therapist had diagnosed me with severe ADD, attention deficit disorder, which basically explained my lack of interest in really anything. Yes, we tried medication, but it didn't really do too much to help curb anything. I mean, maybe it would expand my interest in whatever it was that I was doing for maybe more than a few extra days or so, but other than that, things were pretty much the same for me. No matter what I took, or how many visits to the therapist I went to, the results were basically all the same. As you'd expect, this was a major problem in my life, which only grew in severity when I became a teenager. High school was pretty rough for me, and I actually had to go to special ed classes in high school just to make sure that I didn't fail any of my classes. I mean, even now, I don't have an issue with places like that, not at all. It was just personally more of a hindrance to me in my social life. Then, later on, around the time that I had graduated, it was time for me to get a job. Like basically most teens around my age had to do. And every single time I would apply, I would never last long in the workforce. I think I need not explain that reasoning, as I'm sure it's rather obvious at this point. Unfortunately, this really messed up my future options when it came to a solid career. I mean, think of it for a bit. I pretty much gotten fired almost once every few weeks because of the disorder that I have, and I still continue to pretty much go through all that. That obviously doesn't do me a whole lot of good in my resumes. Not to mention, I wasn't even really making too much in regards to the bank, so helping out with the bills and the like for my parents, who were really struggling to take care of me, was almost an impossibility. And again, it made me feel awful. Especially having to deal with the fact that I may never get the opportunity to actually live a normal life because of these things. My parents, despite them understanding about my condition, I know are greatly suffering because of it, both mentally and financially. Things were obviously going downhill in my life, and I didn't think that I'd ever get the opportunity to ever get out of this, and that I'd be pretty much stuck living with my parents for the rest of my life, likely chances on disability. Then, a small miracle happened. A friend of mine who knew my father well at his business heard about my situation that I was going through and managed to do something awesome for me. He managed to get me a job, and a very well-paying one at that, at a Cartoon Network studio a few miles away from the workplace my dad worked at. Now, when I first heard about this, I was absolutely thrilled with what I was given. I mean, honestly, I was grateful for everything. To make matters even better, my dad's friend even allowed me to live in a small side home that he normally used for vacations, completely rent-free. At least until I was making a good wage and I had money saved up in my bank that, wouldn't break or anything. To this very day, I can't say how grateful I am that he did this for me, which only makes me feel worse for what happened after this whole ordeal. But I won't get into that right now. At least, not yet. After some time and a lot of packing, and more importantly, a lot of love from my parents, I was taken to my new home where I would finally be able to start up a new life. It was one of the best feelings in my life when I finally entered into that home for the first time. Seeing the spacious living room, the kitchen filled with food and other necessities, and the single bedroom there, the single master bedroom there, so spacious and so beautiful, was amazing. The following Monday, I had been picked up via an Uber that I hadn't, given the fact that I hadn't even acquired my license due to my disability, and was brought to the studio for my first day of work. Upon arriving, I was introduced by my boss, who I can't really name for legal reasons, and was introduced to what I'd be doing on site, which was basically acting as a janitor. Nothing really that great, but it was something, and I was grateful for it. I don't think I really need to explain what a janitor winds up doing. It's really no different than basically what other janitors do all over the places. I mean, I guarantee you that the janitor that sits there and works at your local school, likely chances is no different than one that sits there and works at major theme parks and the like. However, there were some perks with it. One of these being, I actually got to see parts of the studio, like where they made the animations for the show, the staff meeting rooms where the episodes were discussed, heck, even the editing rooms where the episodes and shows were officially compiled together. Also, to make things a lot easier on me, I was given another janitor to help me throughout my work, and of course to keep me from either wandering off or basically not doing my task. Technically speaking, this person was more of a supervisor than an actual assistant janitor, but he was there when I needed him. Things honestly went well for a good few months. I was making some relatively decent money, and I was doing various different tasks each day, and the hours weren't even that long, which helped keep my attention. Not to mention that I was living in my own house, rent-free. Unfortunately, all of that wound up going down after the 6th month that I was working there. I honestly have nobody else to blame but myself for what I did. And while I did wind up getting some rather interesting information, it really doesn't excuse my actions. And to this very day, I really regret what I have done. It all started off as another day on my job. However, my assistant janitor was sick that day with the flu, so I was tasked with a few simple chores written down on a list to go around and do in the studio to basically just keep me busy for a couple of extra hours. One of these tasks was to go into the few of the rooms of the studio, dust around, and replace any fading or flickering light bulbs that needed to be replaced. Well, one of these rooms was definitely something that I really don't think I should have entered into, although the directions weren't exactly too clear in the first place. The place that I wound up entering was a very large room, about the size of a master bedroom in a large home. In it, there were various shelves and the like that housed box after box of various film reels, DVDs, and even a couple of VHS tapes, lined up in an even set of rows. I did a little bit of dusting around the place, but other than a few cobwebs here and there really wasn't anything that needed to be cleaned up. Even the light bulbs are still functional. I was going to leave after dusting, but, like always, my mind started to wander and I began to snoop around the place a bit, opening up various boxes and searching through them. There really wasn't much to honestly see. I mean, other than a box of old VHS tapes and the like. That is until I wound up coming across a clear plastic box, well, more of a pencil box, filled with jump drives of all sizes, shapes, and colors. After opening it, I looked around through it, mesmerized by all the colors that were there. Now, normally what anybody else would have done was close the thing up and get out of there. But I didn't do either of those things. Instead, I did something stupid. Actually, not even that stupid, illegal. I grabbed one of the drives without any hesitation and pocketed it into my jeans. Why I did it, even now, I don't really even know. Once I had gotten all of the work and everything out of the way in regards to my day of work, I went back home and began to look through the drive that I had stolen. It really wasn't much to look at. It was just a simple drive with nothing really identifying what it was or what was on it. That is, however, until I decided to plug it into my computer. And as I did so, I was met with a single folder containing one file on it. A video file entitled AWOG the underscore scholarship.mp4. Curious, I clicked on it, and I was met with a pop-up for a passcode. I should have guessed that the thing was probably encrypted. I mean, why wouldn't it be? Now, normally a person would realize that what they were doing, stop what it was that they were doing, and then return the item that was stolen to the rightful person, but I didn't do that. Again. Instead, I was more transfixed on finding out the passcode to the video file that was there right in front of me. It took a little bit of time and a lot of guessing, but I managed to crack the code, out of sheer luck. What it was that I had even entered, I don't even know. Again, it was a lucky guess than anything else that I had typed in. Upon doing so, the video file immediately opened up on Windows Media Player and then began to play. I was quite surprised to see the intro of the show The Amazing World of Gumball playing out on my screen. I didn't even guess that an episode of that show would be on the drive, but thinking back on it now, TAWOG really was a bit of a dead giveaway. I guess I was just too dumb to even think about it. Once the intro had ended, I was met with the main title of the episode, which was The Scholorship. I didn't even bother to question it anymore. I just went back and I just pretty much sat back and watched the episode play out with the main title fading out, and then showing the names of the cast and crew who worked on the show, before quickly transitioning over to the main episode. The episode began with a shot of the Watterson household during the middle of the day. The screen then proceeded to cut up to a close-up shot of Anais, Gumball and Darwin's prodigy sister, attempting to try and connect a few wires together before slowly screwing them into each other using a screwer and a small washer. The camera then quickly panned out to show Anais dressed in a lab coat and goggles, carefully screwing in the wires that she had bound together. Alright, all I need to do now is just screw these things in gently, and everything else should work out nicely with this machine, Anais whispered to herself. After a few more twists, the screw was completely lodged into the wires, onto a slab of wood. Anais simply breathed out a sigh of relief before wiping her brow, and just as she was about to move on to whatever else that she was working on, the scene cut to show the door of her bedroom bursting open rather violently, revealing Gumball and Darwin making their way into her room. Anais, as expected, jumped at the sudden entrance of her brothers. "Whoa!" Anais said aloud before quickly regaining her composure and looking over at her brothers. "Why did you two interrupt me like that? You both know that I'm working on a major project for school tomorrow, right?" Anais asked, rather annoyed. "Sorry for barging in on you, Anais," Darwin answered. "We just came to tell you that lunch is ready." Anais looked at them with a rather shocked look, before immediately slapping her face in annoyance and saying, "You mean to tell me that you broke down my door just to tell me that lunch was ready?" Anais began. "You couldn't have at least just knocked on it and gotten my attention?" "Well, that was Gumball's idea," Darwin said bashfully. "Hey, you're the one that agreed to it in the first place," Gumball snapped. "Dude, we're not gonna fight about this," Darwin said flatly. "Mom's gonna kick our butts if we don't get it downstairs anyway." "Well, you can tell Mom that I'm rather busy right now, and besides, I'm not even really that hungry to begin with," Anais answered, getting back to her work. "Oh, well, okay then. I'm sure that Gumball would love to sit there and eat your food." "Hey!" Gumball said. Both he and Gumball then proceeded to make their way out of the room and back downstairs into the kitchen. The scene then cut back to Anais, who simply sighed once again and then began working on whatever it was that she was working on. The scene then cut to show Gumball and Darwin eating their lunch in the kitchen, with each chew being interrupted by the sound of Anais using various tools and the like upstairs. Gumball, after a bit, swallowed the sandwich that he was eating, and then turned towards his mother, who was busy sweeping the floor. "Hey Mom, what's Anais even doing up there anyway?" Gumball asked. "Oh, that?" Nicole answered. "Well, from what Anais told me, she's currently working on a project for school." Gumball's face fell a little bit before he said, "She already told us that. Any more information you can probably give us?" Nicole simply stood there and thought for a moment before snapping her finger and saying, "Oh, right. She told me that this project is for a contest at the school. Apparently, if she wins, she'll receive a $50,000 grant to any college she chooses in Elmore," Nicole answered. Both Gumball and Darwin's eyes lit up with dollar signs at the mentioning of the amount of money that the grant held. Nicole, however, saw this and said rather firmly, "No, you two, the grant cannot be traded in for cash." Both Gumball and Darwin's faces immediately deflated, literally, at that statement. "Oh," the two boys said. "Honestly, you two, I'm a little bit ashamed that you would both be that greedy enough to think about money like that," Nicole scolded. "And even if she could trade that entire grant for actual money, it isn't any of ours to touch anyway. The money would belong to Anais alone, and none of us, unless it's her choice, are entitled to a single penny of it." "We understand, Mrs. Mom," Darwin answered. Gumball's eyes lit up with excitement all of a sudden, and he immediately spoke. "Hey, I've got a good idea," Gumball began. "How about we all pitch in and help her out with her project?" "That actually sounds like a really good idea, Gumball. We should go and ask her after lunch," Darwin answered. Nicole immediately stopped sweeping the floor and immediately stormed over towards where the two was at, before stopping in the middle of them and getting eye level with each of them, saying in a very serious tone, "You two listen to me, and you both listen to me good," Nicole said, grabbing them both and pulling them closer to her. "Anais has given me and your fathers very strict instructions to not interrupt her or do anything to her project. That includes the both of you as well. Now hear me out, and please hear me out well. You two are not going to do anything that will either bother, annoy, or do any remote kind of damage to her project. Your sister has been looking forward to this ever since she first started school, and I suggest that you respect her wishes. And if either of you do anything that cost her that prize, you both will be grounded for 6 whole months, with no exceptions. Do I make myself clear?" Both Gumball and Darwin, not completely terrified out of their minds, slowly nodded their heads in a yes position. With that, Nicole's face popped back to her normal happy expression as she patted the two on the top of their heads and said in a sweet voice, "Good boys. Now go on ahead and play now. Mommy's got to get the rest of the dishes done." The two boys nodded their heads slowly before running up the stairs into their room at a quick pace. "Well, that was certainly freaky," Darwin said, panting a little bit. "You're telling me, but we've honestly seen worse from her in the past," Gumball answered. "Okay, you've got a good point there," Darwin said. "So, what now?" Darwin asked as he and Gumball made their way over towards the computer. "I don't know. I guess we can just probably waste the rest of our day on the computer, I guess," Gumball said. The scene then transitioned over to show Anais working frantically on the project that she was working on. This continued onwards, showing various clips of her working on the machine, using various tools and the like to finish up what it was that she was making. Kinda like a montage of sorts. After a few minutes of this, the scene then faded in, before proceeding to fade back to show Anais, completely tired out, but happy at what she had made. The scene panned out to show what Anais had actually created. It wasn't exactly too creative in regards to what the show normally gives out, but it was more of it was more of just a giant cube with various monitors, switches, and other devices hooked on it. It looked rather impressive to say the least. The scene then cut to show Gumball knocking on the wall of Anais' room, given the fact that the door was still knocked down from the previous engagement of the two brothers. Anais simply turned around slowly and then said in a rather out-of-breath voice, "Yes, Gumball?" Anais answered. "Dinner's ready if you want to eat," Gumball said. Anais simply stretched a bit before making her way out of the room and downstairs to the kitchen for dinner. Gumball, however, simply stayed in the doorway of Anais' room and eyed the contraption that was sitting only a few feet away from him. Gumball, rather sneakily, made his way over towards the machine and began to eye it rather gleefully. "Wow, I wonder what it is," Gumball said, looking at it from all sides of the machine. As he continued to gawk at it, He made his way over towards one of the sides of the cube and noticed that a few of the bolts were sitting on top of the machine, and right below them were a few screws sticking out of the device that looked rather, well, loose. I wonder if Anais knows about these loose screws. Maybe I should help her out. And just as Gumball was about to grab one of the bolts on the top of the machine, Nicole's voice immediately rang out, which stopped him dead in his tracks. "Gumball, come downstairs, sweetie. Your food's getting cold," Nicole called out. Coming, Mom," Gumball yelled back, before immediately bolting out of the room and towards the kitchen. The scene then cut to show everyone at the dinner table completely full of food and tired as could be. Anais was the first to get out of her high chair and make her way over towards the stairs. "Hey, Mom, is it okay if I put my project in the shed for the night? I don't want to run into it at night and possibly break it," Anais said. "Go right on ahead, honey. The shed should be unlocked, but if it isn't, make sure to take the key out of the garage first," Nicole answered her. "Hey, Anais, just wondering, is it done yet? Can we see it?" Richard asked with a hint of excitement in his voice. "Sorry, Dad, but I'm not showing it to anyone, nor will I show anything about what it does until tomorrow at the contest," Anais answered with a yawn. "And besides, I'm too tired to turn it on anyway." "Well, okay then," Richard answered, slightly bummed out. "You have a good night now." Anais simply nodded her head before making her way up the stairs to go and get her machine. "Okay, boys, it's time for you two to make your way up to bed as well. You both have school in the morning," Nicole answered. "Okay, Mrs. Mom," Darwin answered as he and Gumball made their way out of the kitchen and up the stairs to get ready for bed. The scene then transitioned to show Darwin and his fishbowl sleeping soundly. Well, more like snoring loudly. However, he's quickly awakened by Gumball, who's patting his stepbrother on the head to try and get his attention. "Dude, why did you wake me up? It's like 3 in the morning, Darwin whined. "I know, that's why I need you to wake up and help me with something," Gumball answered. Darwin, now completely awake, yawned once more and said, "What are you talking about, Gumball? What do you need help with? And why at this time of night?" Darwin asked. "Well, Darwin, old buddy, old pal, before Mom called me down for dinner last night, I took a quick peek at Anais's project," Gumball said. "Please tell me you didn't mess with it," Darwin groaned. "No, of course not. However, I did notice that there was something wrong with the device," Gumball answered. "And that is?" Darwin asked. "Well, while looking at it, I noticed that there was a few loose screws with a few of the bolts on top of the device. I think that Anais might have forgotten to screw them in before making her way downstairs for dinner last night," Gumball said. Darwin looked a little bit confused at that statement. Gumball, didn't Anais say that she was completely finished with her project?" Darwin asked, rather confused. "Well, yes, she did. However, she may have forgotten to screw those bolts into the machine," Gumball answered. "If that's the case, then why didn't you tell Anais about that when, so that she could probably fix it?" Darwin asked once again. "Dude, if Mom knew that I even remotely looked at the thing, she probably would have already grounded me She probably would have already grounded me. And besides, Anais looked rather tired anyway, and it's not like she really would have done much of anything to fix it." "What are you suggesting, Gumball?" Darwin asked suspiciously. Gumball then grinned widely when his brother had said that. "Well, I just happen to have a spare key to the shed. Maybe we could go down there and fix it up for her, like good brothers should," Gumball asked. Darwin's face immediately froze in a mixture of surprise and shock at that statement. "Gumball, you can't do that. Remember what Mrs. Mom told us? If we did anything to mess with Anais's project, we'd be grounded. Or, knowing how she tends to act, worse than that," Darwin answered. "Come on, buddy, it's not like we're going to be messing anything up. We're just going to go down there and put in a few of the bolts. That's it," Gumball said. "Gumball, look, I can't let you do that. How do you know that the bolts were supposed to even be screwed in the first place? Maybe Anais didn't put them on there because it wasn't needed. I mean, if she was going to spend all that time working on her project like that, fixing and working in every single bit in detail, do you really think that she'd forget something as small like screwing in a few bolts on a couple of, screws?" Darwin said, trying to reason with Gumball. Well, didn't you see how tired Anais was after she worked on that project all day today? Think about it, man. If you were working on a project for that long with no breaks whatsoever, wouldn't you wind up missing a few things because of how tired you were? Gumball answered, attempting to try and sway his younger brother. Still, though, we really shouldn't do anything. Why not just tell Anais about the loose screws anyway? That way, when she sees it, she can try and fix them later on. Darwin said, she's going to be at school much earlier than we will be in order to She's going to be at school much earlier than we'll be in order to set up the device for the contest tomorrow. We wouldn't even be able to get to her in time because of how early she's getting up. Much less tell her about the loose screws, Gumball answered. You make a good point, but still, Darwin said, still rather hesitant. It's at this point, Gumball looked rather offended by what Darwin was insinuating. I can't believe you right now, Darwin, Gumball said, completely ashamed. You're telling me that you don't want to help out our baby sister? How do you know for sure that those bolts aren't what's keeping that device from breaking into a million tiny pieces, huh? Think of it. What if we don't do anything to help her out, and the machine breaks because we didn't do anything to help her? She'd not only lose that contest, but would lose the grant money for college, too. And it'll be all her faults if we don't help her out. Do you want that, Darwin? Do you want to break our little sister's heart like that? Gumball snapped. Darwin, now broken, simply nodded no. All right, we'll do it, Darwin answered, defeated. Good, now come on, we only have 2 hours to get this done, Gumball said before leading himself and Darwin into the shed to do their business. The camera then transitioned out to show an outside view of the shed, with the sounds of a few twists of wrenches before both boys immediately bursted out of the shed and began making their way up the roof carefully, and then proceeded to hop back into their respective beds. You see, Darwin, that wasn't that difficult, now was it? Gumball said. Darwin, now looking a bit guilty, simply said, before immediately going right back to sleep. The scene that transitioned to show a shot of Elmore Junior High, late at night with all the lights on and various cars and the like parked next to the school. Then there was a series of applause that wind up coming from inside of the school, which in turn caused the scene to cut to the interior of the gym, with row after row of chairs and even a small refreshment table near the back of the school, pretty much decorating the entire place. The room was completely filled to the brim with various characters and the like, most of them unknown for the show at the time, with the Wattersons sitting at the front row seats, with the exception of Anais. The camera then cut to show one of the students walking away with what looked like a baking soda volcano. Once the child left the room, Principal Brown made his way onto the stage and began to address the crowd. And that was little Timmy's demonstration of a baking soda volcano. Like we haven't seen that before, Principal Brown muttered to himself before continuing. Anyway, now we actually have a student here in this school that I'm sure is likely going to impress us all with her intelligence. And I must admit, I'm quite excited as well to see what our star pupil has to offer. So enough of the babbling. I'd like to introduce you all to our new contestant, Anais Watterson, Principal Brown called out. The entire room immediately lit up with applause, with the Wattersons being the loudest of them all. Anais slowly made her way up to the stage, with the device behind her covered in a white sheet in a wagon. Upon making her way to the center of the stage, she immediately pulled off the sheet and began to explain what the device was. Ladies and gentlemen, what I have here today is a device, but not just any device. This device is able to replicate any desire that you wish to obtain, and then proceed to give you a detailed instructions on what is needed to be done to obtain it, Anais said with a smile. Yes, that's good and all, but how does it work? Principal Brown asked. I'm getting to that, Anais said before making her way over towards the machine. You see, when I pull this lever, the device will immediately power up and a set of binoculars will pop out of the side of the device, Anais said, and once it does so, and you look into it, a sheet of paper will be printed out on the side of the machine, and after less than a minute, All you need to do is just pull that paper out and it'll give you the directions of what you need to do in your life to succeed greatly. Completely and utterly foolproof. Anais then immediately turned on the machine, which immediately began to sputter to life. Before the lights started to flash quickly, everyone in the crowd was rather impressed by the display that they were all presented with, and a few even took a couple of pictures with their phones. However, just as the machine began to spit out the goggles from the side of the machine, Anais looked over at the machine and her face immediately froze into a look of shock. The scene quickly cut to show the 3 screws locked tightly to the machine by the bolts. "Oh, no, 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 no," Anais said quietly, slightly panicking as she pulled out a tool bag from Hammer's space and began to rummage around it, beads of sweat pouring down her face at a rapid pace as her fearful expression continued to grow worse. The scene then cut to show the other Wattersons, as well as all the other people in the crowd, looking on, rather confused. Honey, what's wrong with Anais?" Richard asked his wife. "I don't know," Nicole answered back. The camera then cut back to show Anais, who after retrieving a wrench, attempted to try and remove the bolts that had been embedded into the screws. However, her attempts continued to fail over and over and over again. The machine started to shake violently before a bright, blinding light started to burst out from the machine. Everyone in the crowd slowly started to panic. Anais, after seeing what was about to happen, turned towards the crowd and yelled out, "Everybody duck, now!" To which everybody didn't hesitate to do such. But it only lasted for a moment before the machine exploded into a pure white ball of energy that took up the entire screen for nearly a full second. Then, about as quickly as a flash happened, it ended. It showed all the residents looking up from their ducked state. Many of them, if not all of them, were completely unharmed in any form or in any way. Even the chairs and tables that hadn't been tipped over accidentally or the like because of the blast were relatively unscathed. Gumball and Darwin looked at each other and then breathed a sigh of relief. However, the moment of relief was short-lived, as the sound of Anais' screams could be heard. The 2 boys slowly turned around to meet the stage, only to find the entire place had been completely and utterly wiped off the school ground, leaving nothing else more but a large, charred area where the stage once was. Anais was on top of the now broken machine, shaking and burned all over her body. Various 3rd and 4th degree burns all over her body as she cried and shook in pain as she held on to the device for dear life. It was honestly quite a surprise in of its own self that she was even pretty much alive after that. I mean, I get it, it's a cartoon and everything, but still, there's no way anybody could have survived something like that. The scene immediately cut to show the interior of the Elmore City Hospital, with an outside view of Anais' room. Gumball, Darwin, and Richard were all sitting down on a few chairs next to the hospital room. Gumball and Darwin looked extremely guilty. Their eyes were even red and puffy from crying. Richard did nothing else more but glare at the 2 with a mixture of disappointment, anger, and slight disgust. The scene only lasted for a short while before Nicole walked out of the room, before glaring at the 2 boys, before motioning everyone to follow her. They all did, and they continued this walk of shame in complete silence for a good portion of the scene, and only did anybody speak once they were halfway down the road. We're so sorry," Darwin said. Neither Nicole nor Richard answered him. Please, Mom, Dad, We didn't know that would happen, Gumball said weakly. You didn't know that would happen? Nicole said softly, silencing the two boys. You two knew very well that if Anais says that her project is completed, then it's completed. Gumball was about to say something, but was quickly silenced once more when Nicole immediately rose her paw up in the air, silencing them again. She continued to speak, still in that same soft but unnerving tone. While I do understand that you two didn't mean for this to happen, you both still didn't listen to what I said last night. And because of it, look what's happened. Your sister is stuck in the burn unit for who knows how long, and is going to need major surgery that we are not going to be able to afford to get her back to at least her normal self. And that's not even considering the mental trauma that she's gone through because of your selfish actions, Nicole continued, still as softly as ever, but her voice broke at the last sentence, which made the whole thing even more unnerving. And to make matters worse, you cost your sister that grant that she had tried desperately to get in her young life to pay for college. But you two decided to mess with something that you should have at least asked your sister about. But that's gone now. It's all gone now, Nicole said, wiping away a few tears from her face. But, Mrs. Mom, Darwin softly spoke, nearly on the verge of breaking down himself. I can understand Gumball doing something as reckless like this. But the fact that you, Darwin, allowed him to pressure you into doing something that you know you shouldn't have done, and you knew was wrong, is a very shameful act, Darwin Watterson. You could have said no, or you could have came and told me what Gumball was planning. I would have put a stop to it, and had I done that, had you at least told me, everything would have went by fine. But instead you went with it, just because of the fact that your brother decided to guilt trip you. And as far as I'm concerned, you're as guilty as Gumball is, if not a little bit more. Nicole spoke once more. The two boys simply sobbed softly to themselves, understanding what they had done and the severity of the situation that they had put their little sister into. Before I forget, you both are completely confined to your room for the rest of the year. No computers, no television, no video games, no allowance money, nothing of the sort. You may only leave your room to eat, drink, go to the bathroom, and go to school, but nothing else. And if either one of you break that, so help me, you will greatly regret it. Do you understand it? Do you understand me? Nicole said once more. Yes, ma'am, the two boys sobbed. Good, Nicole answered. The scene then cut out to show the car making its way down where the house was at, before finally fading out and ending with the end credits. After watching the video and being a bit disturbed for a few moments, I took the drive out of my computer and placed it into my work pants for the next day. Honestly, I really had nothing to say about the episode. I mean, sure, it was a bit disturbing, especially with the burns that were all over Anais, but I never really understood why it was there to begin with, and why I've never even heard of an episode like that. The very next day, after getting my typical Uber ride down to my job, I made my way over to my janitor's closet to get some items for the day, but I was quickly stopped by my assistant, or in this case my supervisor. He didn't exactly look very happy at me. I had a bit of a heavy feeling in my stomach, as I had a feeling I knew what was going to happen. And this only was proven as he pretty much told me to go over to a room with them. It was there that I wound up seeing one of the higher-ups at his desk looking at me, rather disapprovingly. To make a long story short, they had found out that I had stolen the drive via the security cameras inside of the room. And because of it, after a long lecture and a long scolding, I was fired from my job. Not only that, but when my dad's friend found out, he was completely and utterly disappointed with me. And if anything, was more than hurt over the fact that I had completely and utterly wasted a good opportunity because I chose to steal something that wasn't mine. And because of it, he told me that I had to pack up my things and that I was no longer allowed to live in that house anymore, and that if I were to, I had to start paying rent. This, in turn, was devastating. And I wound up having to move back to my parents' house a month or so later. And let me tell you, when they found out what I had done, they were very upset with me. Actually, no, that's an understatement. They were completely and utterly ticked off. And they didn't hesitate to sit there and let me have it like I was 6 years old. And I don't blame them for it. I had not only done something absolutely stupid on my end that wound up getting me completely fired from my only job, but I also screwed up any more of an opportunity for me to ever actually have a good life again. Even now, as I type this up, I have no job. My parents pretty much hate my guts now, given the fact that they're now, again, financially burdened with me again. And I hate myself greatly for what I've done. I don't really see much actually changing again. And I know that many of you are probably wondering how I was even able to finish this entire thing up, given my situation. The answer to that question is, it's taken me quite some time to actually finish it. I actually have made like a little bit of improvement. It's not by much, but it definitely is a little improvement to try and finish up the things that I know I need to finish up. This entire thing to write down took me about a few months, but given the fact that I didn't have anything else to do, it wasn't really that difficult for me to sit there and finish it. I will always regret the decisions that I've made. And honestly, I don't have anybody to blame. I don't have anybody to blame but myself and myself alone. And I'll have to live with that for the rest of my life.
In fear and surprise as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping, horror-driven, nightmarish, gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at